Good morning, YouTubers, Rumble, Facebook. This is News with a View, hosted by me, John A. Costa. Today is September 4th, 2025. We're doing a live show today and a recorded show. This is episode 125. I want to make a correction on two things I said on, I think, 123 and 124. The first correction was Trump's announcement, and I said, oh, I think it's going to be, this. And it was just a defense, moving, changing the status of the Space Force, which is, all right, we saved $400 million according to Trump, but yeah, who knows? Was it worth a special announcement? Not so sure. Not so sure. The other little correction I'm going to do, also a little cover story and talk about it, where I said the squad's financial, they all became millionaires and things like that. But I want to go in and clarify that. And I've said before, if I see something that I had spoken about and I did not have all the correct facts to, I am going to go back to it. And I am going to go and say, hey, I think I made a mistake here, or let me just clarify a little bit more on why. So, all right, today's show, Governor Walz. I'm going to tear into him. Chicago crime during Labor Day weekend, of course, that's a big news. Tied into that is a Yahoo poll they did about the National Guard and Trump moving them and how no one wants that. And then the fourth thing I will talk about was Representative Omar's financial disclosure. And the fifth thing is to again expand upon the idea that the Trump administration, probably under the direct control of Trump, of course, is actively holding back the list. They don't have, and I'll get into that, the list during the Epstein episode. So we'll go into that. So it's Walz, Chicago crime, Yahoo poll, Representative Omar's financial disclosure, and Republican questioning on why these lists that they do have is not being released. All right. Let's get to it. I'm going to take my favorite shot here and go into it. Did a little thing on state rights. Got my book out there, tying in with different amendments in the Constitution. But we're going to go back, talk about Walz. Just days after the murder of 2 children and the wounding of 16 others, adults and children, Governor Tim Walz, Minnesota, makes a joke about rumors and waking up to find that President Trump had died. His comment came days after conspiracy posts falsely claimed Trump had passed away, assertions that were quickly proven false when the president was seen golfing with his granddaughter in Sterling, Virginia. And his comment, you get up in the morning, you doom scroll through things. You woke up the last few days thinking there might be news. Walz said, smiling, just saying, there will be news sometimes. There will be news. Governor Tim Walz drew sharp criticism after joking at a Labor Day picnic that he half expected to wake up to news of President Trump's death. Remarks that drew laughter from his supporters. What an a-hole. He's had 2 major shooting events in his state. Remember the two legislators, Democratic legislators, that were shot by an appointee that Walz had put, that shot these two politicians? And then they have a school shooting at a Catholic school that resulted in the deaths of two children. And he makes jokes about waking up and going in and watching the doom scroll and hoping that he sees Trump's name on it. What? I just can't. I knew this guy was a putz. I knew this guy was a disaster. And that he has no place in politics. It goes beyond words. Yeah, I knew he was incompetent. I knew he was not the brightest guy out there. And Harris had to go with someone, and he agreed to do it. But who would have figured that Walz's son would be the brains of the outfit, right? So this just keeps proving what I've kept saying, that the Democrats have nothing. They are, and when I say Democrats, I'm saying the people in the leadership roles of the Democratic Party that speak. When they speak, people listen. And here he's making jokes about the rumor, and in essence, hoping that it's true. And the people all sitting there, yay, yay. This is why in 2026 you will see a defeat of the Democrats that is going to make 2024 look like a day at Disney when all the rides are working right. Just weeks before, Walz had told Democrats it might be time to be a little bit more fierce and to bully the shit out of Trump and bully him back, labeling him a wannabe dictator. Days later, after the assassination of the Minnesota's House Speaker, Melissa Hortman, Walz condemned political violence. Critics says his mixed messaging only underscores how left-wing rhetoric is fueling real-world danger. And you're getting people who are already have mental problems, and you're rallying them. And he might not see that, but anyone that has an ounce of brains who is in the public sector and who, he doesn't respect life. So I'm expecting, to read poetry to a goat and then wait for the goat to respond to the poetry. Not going to happen. This is a guy that thinks terminating a life at 9 months or a live birth abortion is perfectly okay. It goes beyond the pale of common sense. Now, I will take the flip side. We remember when in 2015, maybe it was 2016, then President Trump, President 45, right, had said something to the fact I could shoot someone on Park Avenue and still be elected. But he wasn't a political person in the sense he was not sitting in an elected official seat. Yeah, I was not happy with him doing that. You know, it's just not the right thing to do. So, the idea that Walsh, after two major incidents, would even make a reference joke like that just shows how totally disconnected he is from the rest of the country. And how, again, the Democrats have nothing they're bringing to the table. They're bringing rhetoric, they're bringing hate, they're bringing violence, but they're not giving solutions to the problems. We had a border problem. They turned their back on it. No, we don't. Like they were the captain on the Titanic. No, we're not sinking. We're just stopping for ice. An economic problem. They just didn't address it. They called it, Republican, Republican, hate speech, and they're just doing anything to discredit, President Biden. Biden doesn't have a memory issue. He doesn't have all these things going on, and it just wasn't the case. It was actual truth. So Walsh, again, it's hard to figure out how a person like that will be taken seriously again. And this will all come out, believe me when I tell you folks, all this stuff will come out in the primaries. And, I'm going to touch upon some other things here, but I lost my sheet here. I keep putting it down, my cover sheet, and I really should just push this all to the side. All right, so I spoke 13 minutes about Walsh and his incompetency and his disconnect from what's going on around him. So it's very telling of the Democratic Party. All right, we're going to talk about Chicago crime. 58 shot, 8 dead in Chicago over the Labor Day weekend. Now, normally I would have jumped all over that on Tuesday or Wednesday. Yesterday I did not do a show. Got busy and I just was digesting a lot of this news and going over what I had said on the previous podcast, and was like, I got to make some corrections here. And they'll dive deeper into what I said and how it wasn't completely accurate. It wasn't wrong. It just wasn't completely accurate. So, I know you could say, well, then you were wrong. No. If I said this was a circle and it was 4 inches in diameter in all directions, and they go, no, it's 3.99, it's inches. Well, it's still a circle. It's just the dimensions were wrong. So, still a circle. All right. That's my logic, folks. So 8 dead in Chicago. Yeah, 8 dead in Chicago. I think they had a couple dead in Philadelphia. And listen, every state's going to have crime. I don't care if it's blue state, red state, whatever. You're going to have crime. Chicago gets picked out because of the randomness of it and the continuation of it. They can't stop it. And they just won't fess up to the problem that they have. And it's not illegal guns. It's not they're going out of state and buying the guns and bringing it in there. It's none of that. It's not. They have the toughest gun law of any city in the nation. It's a problem with the people. And then it's a problem with the government, who won't admit that the problem is with a certain element in the city. It's not racist. It's not profiling. It's called facts. And they just won't admit to the problem. And there's been crime in Chicago, since the days of, olden days. It's nothing new to the city of Chicago. If it wasn't gangsters, if it wasn't something else, there was always violence. But most of that violence that took place during the gangster era were against other gangsters. They weren't just pulling up to a street corner and just deciding, I'm going to shoot a bunch of people. I don't care if I hit innocent people. Well, I'm sure that had happened in Chicago too. But the crime rate, the murder rate, children being killed on a almost daily basis there, or shot or maimed. That a family, you can't send your kid out to the park because you don't know what's going to happen. Where are the police? Why aren't the police doing what the police should do? Because they're being told not to. That's the problem. And and when they do, they go, you're picking on us because of our color. Well, if the neighborhood is 99 or 90% made up of one ethnic or race, what do you think is going to happen? You think the police are just going to look for the other 10% of the people that are doing crime? No, they're going to look at overall, and if that's the makeup of the community, well, yeah, they're going to get. There's going to be, if they commit crimes, they're going to be arrested. The whole idea of profiling is fine if it's being applied equally. But if you're in a high crime area and you set up police to pull people over who have, remember, the police have to have a reasonable reason to stop you. They just can't say, I don't like the looks of that guy. They have to have a reason. Then once that happens, then, it can escalate. And I do agree with that. I do agree that does happen. Where a police officer will pull someone over and they go, well, you kind of squiggled a line over here. You been drinking? You smell that? I understand that. I understand where people can be put into a situation if they don't know their rights. But I also understand that if 90% of the crimes that's happening in that area is done and I put up a, police, and I use profiling. Hey, these guys just came by me at 65 in a 50. That gives me a reason to pull them over. Now, the police are going to know that, 90% of the times that's going to be a black occupant in that car, let's say in Newark. So that does happen. I can tell you from experience that I would drive into Manhattan, I'd cut through certain neighborhoods to get off the main drag, just to get by lights that everyone gets stacked up at. And I have been stopped. And when I've asked the officer, what are you stopping me for? And they go, well, this is a known prostitution area. Yeah, well, that's not good enough. What did I do that the other car in front of me didn't do? Or behind me? Well, where are you going? Where are you coming from? You don't have to answer those questions. And those are all leading questions so that they could talk to you more, they could study you more. I know I'm going off topic, and I will address this issue in another show. But the crime rate in Chicago is out of control. The local leadership there can't figure out how to do it, how to stop it. Lori Lightfoot couldn't do it. Brandon Johnson can't do it. And it's not that they can't do it, they're unwilling to do it. There's the difference. Mayor Johnson refuses to do it. He will not admit, because they have a more than competent police force. And the only reason he's screaming about Trump coming in there is because it will expose the whole failure of the administrations under the Democrats to rein in the crime. And it's difficult now to get the facts on these cities because of the reporting process has been so skewed. And every city has their, or every state or every whatever, they have their own bar in reporting these incidents of crime. I mean, murder is murder. There's no way they can not report that. But they can decide what's a crime and what is not a crime. And then that shows, well, look, crime rate has gone down. Yeah, well, okay, you had 2 less murders last year. Yes. Or 8 or 12 less murders. Because you probably took those people that commit those murders and took them off the street, maybe. Or those people fled and they're not killing anyone anymore in that city. They're somewhere else killing someone. Or they took off and they never caught the guy. Or the gal. I'm not going to say them. But, so that statistical reporting, could be skewed very, it can be skewed. And that goes for red states too. It's just not blue states. So it's hard to find it on any given date. You can, but it's very subjective, and I'm sure there's an easy way to pull it up when you go to FBI crime statistic, but that's being reported. I need the state data. I need to count it. And the best way to look at that is you got to go and find out what the news is saying. 6 people shot here. on this date. And then you have to reference that back to, was it reported? And then you find out that, yeah, it wasn't reported like that. So, it's a difficult situation to go in and actually find this data and fine tune it. But I can tell you in Chicago and in Baltimore and a lot of these cities, Philadelphia, and I will say not so much New York, but New York still, there are areas that, you know, they just know is bad. And, you know, there's not much they can do about it other than going in there and really getting tough with them. And, they, you know, remember, we can't stop and frisk, and that stopped a lot of crimes. Because they said, well, you weren't doing that in Staten Island. Well, we weren't having a crime problem like that in Staten Island. And believe me, if that's going on in Staten Island, we'll do it in Staten Island. But I don't have to quid pro quo searching and dealing in a high crime area. You know, you got a bulge underneath your shirt or your, you know, I can see the gun, you know, and you're near a school and that says I'm allowed to, you know, ask you. And if you start acting hinky, that gives me probable cause to go, if I'm a police officer, to go further in my detaining you. And I'll go into all that. Now, with that tied in, Yahoo YouGov poll, they did show just 37% of Americans said they would approve the president sending soldiers to other major cities after D.C. And it was what I call like an unqualified question. Almost like, so when you hit your wife, oh, I don't hit my wife. What are you talking about? You know, but I'm asking you this question. I'm sorry. Who doesn't want crime to be addressed in their city, other than the criminals not wanting it addressed? So when they said 37% of Americans they would approve of the president sending, just 37% said they would approve it. Who did they ask? Were they asking someone in a community that, you know, has police that do their job, that is allowed to do their job, and they don't have the crime, so they go, well, I don't want soldiers here. Why would I want them here? But if they asked people in areas where they're being plagued by crime, they might go, yeah, well, the cops ain't doing their job. You know, so these polls, and I've said this before in other podcasts, are all done in such a manner. They go to psychologists and they go, what's the best way to ask this question to get this answer? And that's what they do. You know, would you be happy seeing your children see government troops with guns walking around your neighborhood? Well, no, I wouldn't be happy with that. Well, okay, well, there's your, 60% of the people that we ask that question to don't want the military in their neighborhood. So you see how those questions can be framed to solicit the answers that they want. So, now, of course, there are district judges that are now saying that Trump's use of the military, using, the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act, which really was the ability for, let's say, a sheriff to appoint able-bodied people to deputize them, and then also to bring in, you could be conscripted. Really, what that really meant. But in this case, he's using National Guard troops to come in, and normally, a governor can request National Guard to be brought into their state and can ask other states adjoining, connected border states, their governors for permission to ask their National Guard to come in and to assist their National Guard. And on very rare occasions, the president can send in federal troops, which was done before. It's been done numerous times. In this case, President Trump said that he was exercising that this is an invasion, and in essence, an insurrection, and that if the government is not representing the people and the laws, and following the laws of their state and following the laws of the United States, well, and they're willfully doing it, that could be a problem. I think that, the Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the president from deploying the armed forces to participate in domestic, unless there's a domestic problem, and the one is insurrection is underway. This was in response. This law was actually in response after Reconstruction, after the Civil War, or as they say here in the South, the War of Northern Aggression, where if the government, federal government, felt that local government was acting in a manner that was threatening the sovereignty of that state's connection into the Union, yeah, we could send troops in there. We could squash you like a bug. It's limited in scope, and 90% of the time when it was used, it was with the approval of the local government. The only time it was not was during the civil rights movement in Alabama and Mississippi, and where forced desegregation of the schools, and the local politicians, remember Wallace, then we're not going to have this, and the government came in and said, no, we're doing this because that's what the Constitution says, and you'll follow the Constitution. The argument is being made and fought with these local governments under state rights under the 10th Amendment, where the states can't be forced to follow the laws of the government, which is a real misrepresentation of what that really meant. Because really in the 10th Amendment, where they discuss that, the federal government has the power that is inherent to the government. Akin to, you give Caesar what is due Caesar's, and you give God what is due God. Really, and when the framers were all arguing about this 10th Amendment thing, it was so that there was some separation of state powers and the federal government, and an understanding that the state constitution will address items that are not covered under the Constitution of the United States. So if it wasn't mentioned or it's different than what uh, you you could not, the government could not force a state to follow federal law. Now, we know that that's not the case. Mississippi could not bring back slavery. New York could not make murder legal. So we know from a basis point what is and what isn't allowed. And that 10th Amendment was saying, in essence, that if it's not guaranteed by the government, then state rights take over. And that is exactly what Roe v. Wade was. The state legislators for their states, because it is not a guaranteed constitutional protection, abortion, the states could decide on their own. And their laws on their citizens can vary from state to state. The argument being with Roe v. Wade under the 10th Amendment, too, is that if I'm a person that lives in a state where all abortions are banned, or it's very limited in scope, and I go to a state where it goes abortions for everyone, and I have an abortion there, and then come back to my state and they go, you went to that state for an abortion, you violated our laws. Well, no, I didn't. I went to a state that had those laws. Well, you're not a sovereign citizen there. So the question then goes to the federal government. How can states recognize the laws of other states? And they do that like with motor vehicle, but those are regulations, they're reciprocal. But when it comes to some of these, items, it gets very cloudy. It gets very cloudy. I think the 10th Amendment, we know that the EPA can go in and do things. Now, states had EPAs, environmental protection agencies, that, go, well, I know what the federal government said, that, these are the standards. But in our state, we have a much higher standard. So now what happens? A company like Exxon goes, hey, I met the standard set up by the federal government. I distribute nationwide. My fuel is nationwide. And you're telling me that, I can't produce it here because of your EPA standards. Which one holds ground? And you'd say that, well, unless it's an EPA, unless it's been law, federal law, well, that's a standard. If you want to set up your own EPA, well, it has to conform to the federal guidelines. And if you want to change that, then that becomes a problem, because who has the final say on that? And with the understanding, mostly with the EPA, because you could have And this has happened in New York, where they have a law that states you can't, you know, you can't pollute. Yet there's a factory over there with smoke coming out, blowing, 90% of the times across my state. And all right, you're polluting me, but you're in a state that allows it, and it's hitting me. The same thing with water, and so these are truly legal arguments that needed to be pounded out in the courts, and some of it has, and some states don't like it. So other states love it. Industry doesn't like it because industry would love to do everything on the cheap and do what they want to do. So it's important that we don't allow that to happen. And as I said, we can live without a lot of things, but water and air ain't one of them. So those have to be protected. To what extent, but if the states elect legislators that are, ban it all, we got to go back to horses, what do you do? Because that's what the people want, and that's what they voted for, and it's the will of the people, not the will of some of the people. So that's what's going on with that. And Trump did declare an invasion, and states not acting in the defense of laws and federal immigration policies. And the states are saying, we don't have to assist you in providing any services that impugn any legal persons, we don't have to help you with that. That's your problem. In LA, the police could not protect federal officers, and Trump sent in the military. They weren't arresting people, they were handing them over to the police. They were protecting federal buildings and federal forces, policing actions, protecting those agents. And LA said, well, we didn't ask for that. And guess what? You don't have to ask for it. Trump going into Chicago and going, I'm gonna go from one end of Chicago to the other end of Chicago with my ICE agents. He can do that. And he could send in troops to back those agents up, just for protection, not to arrest. ICE agents can make a civil arrest. Because remember, the immigration policy is a civil policy, not a criminal policy. And that's where it always got murky. It's a civil action. So when you see these polls come out from, it's all how they ask the question and who they ask it to and where they ask it. If they asked it at a community college or a college, and the students are, no, hate the military, hate Trump, they're going to say no. If you ask people in a high crime neighborhood, they might say, yeah, I'd like to see more protection. I'd like to have my kids, not get shot. Who wouldn't? So I don't believe any of their polling. Even when Republicans poll, they do the same thing. They go to psychology. How do I ask this question to solicit this answer? And that's what they do. So this isn't the man in the street type of thing. This is all, they got real good at knowing what questions to ask to get the answer they need. All right. Now, I had said something the other day about Omar and the squad, and not necessarily Omar, but just the squad. All their net worth has gone up since getting into politics, and people jumped all over Omar because Omar's net worth jumped from below zero to $30 million since joining Congress. And that is a true statement. But when I started looking down on the breakdown of what she was reporting, well, figures always lie and liars always figure. But she answered correctly to the best of her knowledge. And while somewhat, it's a factual statement, that statement needs clarification. And if you use 2019 filings that she did, you'd see that she had like a negative net worth. She owed more money than she had, which is, if you have $20,000 in the bank and you have a $70,000 mortgage, just using that as an example because it's easy numbers. Well, you have a negative net worth of $62,000 because you only have $8,000. I'm going to say $8,000 in the bank, and you owe 70. You minus what you got in cash, and you are worthless. So you could say I'm negative $62,000, my net worth, which is not totally accurate. And in her case, her 2024 disclosure, because remember, it's a year behind. Just like when you file your taxes. We're not going to file for 2025, we're going to file for 2024. The same is true with, government officials disclosing under the federal guidelines their financial condition. And in May of 2025, she listed millions in assets. But then you find out they're an estimated valuation for businesses run by her husband, political consultant, and an entrepreneur whom she married in 2020. So while they're not her holdings, in essence, it is the corporation that they have that her husband controls, and as such, she can have access to the money made by those endeavors, which is perfectly legal, as long as she's not taking money from the business directly. But if he's taking the money and go, hey, I made, $2 million, and that's what my company made, and that's what they paid me, well, she has access to that $2 million. If they have joint accounts, and if that's the way things are set up, she has access to it. Or she can even have access to say, hey, I need $10,000. And, yeah, all right, here's $10,000. You don't need a joint account. I can just give it to you. No, but that could be gifting, and that's handled a little bit differently, but not in a married circumstance. It's going to be understood that you can have a blending, and you don't have to report that blending. You just have to report that it's there. And she did. So she estimated the cost of some of these businesses from $6 million to $30 million, a range. Taking probably the least that it could do and the most that it could do, which is fair. I'm sure she did not file anything differently than anyone else files under those circumstances. And no one from ethics committees or anyone has, even said to look at it to go, yeah, this kind of looks funny. She listed her personal debt correctly. She owns school loans, she owns credit cards, and where she said anywhere from $1,000 to $15,000 she might owe. Well, because that's her credit line, and that I can owe that. If I did this on this date and you wanted a snapshot of that date, all right, I owed $3,500, but the next day I charged $10,000. And while she can charge her travel and everything like that and then get reimbursed back, that number can go up and down. So giving an estimate like that is perfectly legitimate, because you had minimum and you had a maximum. That's all. That's all. So she went in there with nothing because she didn't have a retirement account set up through the state. She didn't have a retirement account set up through the federal government. And, she has about $80,000, maybe $87,000 or $97,000 in those type of accounts, which is, like an IRA. But her majority of her listed assets came from two businesses run by her husband, and that were labeled as partnership income. But she didn't do those. Those assets were brought in from marriage. All right, so it was wines, at between $1 million and $5 million, and a venture capital management company, Rose Lake Capital, was valued between $5 million and $25 million. Now that's pretty steep. But, I don't know, if they borrow money to buy businesses and sell them and stuff. So again, today it might be $5 million, tomorrow it might be $20 million. So we don't know. But if you're asking me, this is the most I think we're going to do that we have done that historically I can show. Maybe it could be more. I don't know. And if we have to amend the filing, we'll do it as prescribed by what the government says that they need to do. I think they only got to file every year. You don't have to file when you have material changes. Not that I know of. So, so she has between $15,000 and $50,000 in credit card debts and things of that nature, school loans and stuff. So, based on her financial disclosure forms, she has between $6 and $30 million in partnership. But her individual net worth is anywhere between a negative $82,000 and a positive $65,000. So it depends on how you want to do it, but she stated before that she has no stocks and no other assets in her name. And that's all they kind of ask. And she reported that, under her partnership agreement, she does have that, but that was brought in from marriage. So I'll defer to that. All right, we're like 54 minutes into this thing already, and I like only doing about an hour. But I wanted to clarify that. And I made a statement that they all became rich after joining. Yes, that is true. They have. But in this case, with Omar, and I think I might have said her name. I didn't go back and play, but I looked at my little sheets and I did have Omar. So if I did, I'm going to make that clarification. The facts are correct, but you have to put everything into a what do they call it? A context. So there were legitimate reasons why her net worth went up, other than her making deals and book deals, and that's where I was saying that a lot of these guys, their assets grew because they wrote books that you can't find anywhere. The Epstein stuff, again, this is a continuation of the story the other day. The media's fascination with it, and the left's, liberals and Democrats' fascination with it. And the Republicans are kind of getting, some of them are starting to get a little pinched by it. And several congressional Republicans are going against the wishes of President Donald Trump with calls for more clarity on the administration's handling of Jeffrey Epstein's scandal ramping up, a move seen by White House as a very hostile act. Well, yeah, well, tough. Most of the items that have been sent out is stuff that we all knew, that everyone knew was going on. That this was nothing new. There was no blockbuster findings in that. So what has happened now? Some of these oversight committees, they have released 33,000 Epstein-related documents, including videos and audio files, appearing to make good on a promise made in August. However, nearly all the files released were previously available to the public. Yeah, well, it's the same ones that they had. House Republicans are trying to make a spectacle of releasing already public documents, said Robert Garcia, Democrat, representative from California, of course. But some Republicans are calling for more transparency, with one alleging that President Trump could be covering for powerful allies. And I said this. I said that's a real possibility, that not only allies of Republican, but allies of Democratic donors who might have given money to Trump, might have gotten money from people that were Epstein's Island that went to Democrats. And Trump could be sitting back and, he goes, I don't want to have guilt by association. And then you have the people say, well, just release the stuff that's harmful to this person. That, and the problem with that is they go, well, what about that guy? Well, he didn't do it. Well, how do we know? So release it all. And this is the problem. How do you minimize the collateral damage to other people who all had ties to Epstein? Bill Clinton. And you don't think Bill Clinton didn't have Democratic friends that were associated with Epstein? He was a procurer. He put people together. Did he have entertainment? Yeah, he had entertainment. The women that are crying, abuse and all that, were long-term participants in Epstein's follies. I would say that if I was one of those women, or a lawyer for one, I'd be suing each other also. Why didn't you go to the police and report all this? Why didn't you do this? You didn't protect me when you knew this was going on and I was there. And who saw what? Who's witnessing any wrongdoing there? And Thomas Massie of Kentucky Republican said that everything should be released. I think the best way to clear President Trump's name is to release all the files. President Trump's name wasn't on there other than, what is known to be on there. His association ended with him, according to everyone. Now, we can all speculate and say, well, if there was anything bad there, wouldn't Biden have used it against Trump? Well, maybe not. Because if there were bad things in there about other Democrats that are still there, and donors that are still there, well, that could be bad for business for all of us. And best to just keep it under lock and key with the Department of Justice and say this is an ongoing investigation. We can't talk about it. Now, with Maxwell being locked up and no report of any other, according to the federal government and Department of Justice from both administrations, this is done. It's over. Now it's all civil. Nothing to do with us. We did what we needed to do. And again, if that's the case, why not release all the documents? Now, the government can go in there and go, listen, we got some of this information from people under, agreements with the government, informants, we put people undercover. We can't out these people. And we feel for people that are making these charges, but we can't out our sources, and we still feel that there still might be some meat on the bone here that we can go after, but we released what we could release, and they have to build their case that way. The problem with that is that you could have a court turn around and go, yeah, that's very good and very well, and yeah, but got to release that information. So you got you got 10 days to get that information to those lawyers. And what do you do? So this Epstein information thing and releasing it and not a coordinated thing, 10 days into their administration, I got the list on my desk. Well, no. I had a list of things we were going to release. I didn't have the Epstein. That's the Epstein list of the stuff I'm giving out, not a list from Epstein. I mean, that's how I go, oh, okay, listen, you're getting hung up on words here. And then do a reclarification. I have a list of Epstein's documents that will be released, not a list from Epstein. There is no list. There is no black book. We have a Department of Justice things where we put names on it, but that's not Epstein's list, that's our list. And we still have ongoing investigations going with that, so you're not getting that list. We can't put that out there because these people might not know we're doing an investigation on them. And they could have done that. It was handled so poorly. So poorly. And now, my opinion is releasing a list will only disrupt those persons who did nothing wrong or knew of anything wrongdoing going on. Guilt by association is my guess, but the idea that the administration is worried about people on the naughty list are also political allies or donors is a real fact. It is something that a conspiracy theorist could bring up to say, hey, are there names out there that they just don't want brought to the light of day? And are they going to sit with Democrats to go, hey guys, see these names? These are your colleagues. They might not have done anything wrong. They just went to the island or had interactions that we picked up with Epstein. Dinners, meetings, phone calls. But as far as we know, they haven't done anything wrong. But if we release this, they're going to be just dragged into the mud. And here's our guys on this list. They're going to be dragged down into the mud. Now, we know that these people didn't do anything wrong. We have nothing on these people. They're clean. But they're going to be splattered with mud. It's going to hurt you guys. It's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt the whole playing field here. Let's come up here with a consensus. Release it or not release it? You guys could have released this as data that you guys had. And you sat on it. We didn't discover this stuff and 2 days after we got in, we found a list that you never looked at. This is the Department of Justice list that we have that came from you guys with your people's names on it. How do you want us to do this? Some of these people are good people. I know for a fact that they didn't do anything wrong. They were, were they lobbying for someone else? As long as it wasn't a foreign interest. Happens every day. But they're going to think they went with Jeffrey Epstein and, they had a night of debauchery. When there was no night of debauchery. This guy left, got on a plane, and flew home. So those are some real issues that are out there that must be taken into light. But it is the administration protecting the whole game, not just their game or the other people's game. We're all in this frying pan together, and we'll all burn together. We win or we all hang together. How do you want to do it? You tell me. If you want this to go on, you got to start steering your people this way, and I got to start steering my people this way. We agree? Good, this is done. But I want a consensus right now. Because we got business to do. Tell me how you want to handle this business. All right, with that, I'm going to say later I'm going to get the show out as soon as possible. It's over an hour and 10 minutes now. Coming up on an hour and 10 minutes. By the time I'm done editing, it'll be about an hour and 10, probably an hour and 11 minutes. Give to a charity if you can give. Make sure it is a real charity and you don't become a victim helping victims. Give to a food bank. They need more than just food. Check with your local food bank on what they need. And help. Help in what you can. Say a prayer. Prayer does work. And for everyone else, I'm going to say be safe. Have a good a uh, uh, a good day. If you are not a subscriber to this channel, please subscribe. It's it's non-monetized. I don't get nothing. I'm not looking to get anything. It's just helps me then go with the live. I can actually go live instead of it just going out there and then I got to put it out and do it. I think I need a total of 50 new subscribers in the next 3 months that then I can go and start being live. So, all right, with that, I appreciate it. Everyone be safe, and I'll catch you later as I fade to black.